Greetings. I'm Shelley Brazley and I'm here for Color News Long Island. Today we are excited that we have the mayor of the Village of Hempstead, Mayor Don Ryan, with us. And there has been a lot of chatter but we get to talk to him face to face today and ask the questions that many of you have been asking. So welcome. And we're going to get started. The community has many questions about your last 4 years in office. And a lot of times we're not privy to why decisions are made. And so we want to talk to you, Mayor, and see, we address some of the concerns of the community. As long as I've known you, you've been pretty straightforward. You've always been there for the community. And so now the community wants to ask. Some people are questioning things, but that's good. We get to have some conversation. So what would your first 100 days look like?
One of the things has to do with law enforcement, with the police. We have something we call Park, Walk, and Talk. It's not new. It's being reintroduced. I think it's the phenomenon that we need to connect between the people in the police department. Police will park the car, they'll walk, and they'll talk to the residents. So I think this is going to be something that helps. Obviously, with the weather breaking, this would be a good time to get started in key areas, not just Terrace Avenue, Martin Luther King Drive, Main Street, throughout the entire community. So we're going to make it uncomfortable for those who are looking to violate the law or to hurt us in terms of quality of life with petty crimes, etc., not to be able to do that. So when we grew up in Hempstead, the police did walk the beat. They knew your parents, you knew them by name, etc. So we want to get back a little bit to that era so that the police will have an opportunity with the residents to be able to cooperate and be able to have a connection. One of the things I'm concerned about, it seems that every meeting or every other meeting we're putting on some part-timer. And the question is, when asked why is this the case, we're losing our part-timers, our good part-timers, to kind of jobs even at a McDonald's, because we're paying $14.91 an hour. They can do better than that most places. We have to up that a few dollars an hour, attract the best and keep the best. So that's another thought that I have. And also, when I get into office, prayerfully, one of the first things that's going to happen is the Juneteenth celebration. Now, Juneteenth is a unique celebration. We're thinking about asking the board to make it an official holiday for the village. So I think we should get a committee together, get the Juneteenth celebration going. The festival this year, I think, should be moved out of the parks and onto Main Street. The more things we can do on Main Street, the more excitement we can create, add a personality to that area, and help the business people. So that would be one of the things that I think is good. The obvious goal is to attract people, even from outside of the community, to come in and see Hempstead and the events that we have. I want to redesign the building department. I think it's important that code enforcement, I think, be separate and apart. Also, we need more code enforcement officers. We don't cover evening and we don't cover weekends. That's not going to work. We got to make sure now we put that in. The penalties involved, which goes now to court's jurisdiction, needs to be such that individuals aren't just happy to pay the fine and not correct the problem, but actually we get their attention and they go about trying to correct it. I am trying to reestablish, and have done so, a dialogue with the master developer. Obviously, the idea of adding a personality to the downtown, more small businesses and so forth, is imperative. How do you do it? Well, I want to make sure that we have a say in what goes into the community. That means the residents. I want to also make sure that anybody who comes in here and is talking about a pilot, that it's not a case of the rich getting richer. The pilot has got to be designed to have a considerable number of jobs for our village residents. That's a must. So I have gotten some dialogue with Don Monti, which in itself is, I'm ready to fly to Oslo, get my Nobel Peace Prize. But the fact is, there is possibilities with the pilot. They could make the village whole. They can be fair and legitimate in the length of a pilot and in terms of the numbers of jobs they can create. And this could be the type of partnership which can cement the community with the developer, and we can go forward.
So can I just, the purpose of a pilot, first of all, audience, pilot is payment in lieu of taxes, okay? Just so we're all clear, payment in lieu of taxes. And the purpose of a pilot is to help businesses, give businesses a jump start. And what we want is for them to be able to be self-sustaining by the end of the pilot. And we want them to be able to contribute to our tax base, right? And so we're looking for businesses to come into Hempstead that can honor the spirit of the pilot, right?
Well said. And now the idea of the pilot, like you said, is designed to improve for the village. Some of the new apartments that want pilots and have long-term pilots and no job return is foreign to me, and it doesn't have my support. Another thing in the first 100 days, there's an area, and you'll be familiar with this, by Jackson, Maine. It's a triangle across the street from
Yes.
Jackson, Maine. I'd like to make that the Heritage Triangle and have at that Westbury Boulevard and Bennett Avenue intersection not only more green space, obviously, but to honor the culture of all of the fabric of our village. For example, how about a flag for each of the nationalities of the people who now occupy the village? It would be a lot of pride for them. It wouldn't be the most expensive undertaking, and I think it would have a great return. Finally, I would like to make sure that the trustees' contact information is available. And I think one of the things that people don't understand is the trustees are all assigned to certain departments, two to a department. So when it comes to oversight, when it comes to supervision, when it comes to accountability, they're all part of that equation. Of course, it takes 3 out of the 5 on a normal vote, but I think if we list, for example, the things they're responsible for, talking about candidates only, Trustee Hobbs is the building department, fire department, DPW, as examples and more. Johnson has the building department and traffic safety. Renfro is the legal department and the library and DPW, but there's 2 to each one. Now, this doesn't mean we exclude the other 3 trustees, but as a courtesy, if they want to get involved in another area, bring the 2 trustees assigned to that area, let them know what it is you intend to do, bring them into the conversation, and work forward for the best interest of the residents. But if there's a sheet where they can look and see, well, I got a DPW issue. Well, these are the 2 trustees, that's their extension, and they can make some direct calls. I think that would be one of the things I'd like to have happen. And these are several of the things I'd like to have happen in the first 100 days.
Okay, so that's very interesting. I'm going to shoot back to accountability.
Sure.
So let me see if I understand what you're saying. Each trustee shares responsibility for the different departments.
There are 2 trustees assigned to each department.
Oh,
So those are the 2 go-to people. They're the ones who help in accountability, those who help in letting me and others realize that there's some questions and so forth. And they have direct contact, obviously, with the supervisors, then they can move forward as a unit together. But yes, we all accept that. I don't think accountability is just on me. I think the accountability is on all of the trustees as they are assigned to various departments.
so during the campaign, we're hearing that you're responsible for the lack of services and the lack of responsiveness with the employees in the village, namely the commissioners or directors or whatever title it is, where they're over. So it's not just you running the day-to-day, the trustees help you with that?
Each department has 2 trustees assigned to that department. They attend the meetings, they make recommendations, they review situations, they talk to the supervisor. In fact, we passed a law where if there's a policy to review department that the trustees passed, in which each of those trustees evaluate the area they're responsible for if they're so inclined, meet with the supervisor, make recommendations, and then forward the improvement recommendations to the board as a whole. So this is an available avenue. Obviously, come to me if that's the issue. But by all means, the fact that they are assigned and that they do attend those meetings puts them kind of a step between me and those meetings, and should help in making sure accountability is in place.
Okay, so it's your responsibility to discipline them, but it's the trustees also have some responsibility in that equation.
Well, they certainly can let me know, but the mayor disciplines. There's no question about that.
Okay.
Once in a while, we cross a little bit of a gray area. As you know, this is Friday when we're meeting. Tomorrow at noon, we're going to be dedicating a road for Dr. Gates.
Right.
Now, Dr. Gates is in a unique situation. 2 weeks prior to his being disenfranchised, we passed the budget. One of the items in the budget was his salary, and it was approved. But 2 weeks later, by a 3-2 vote, it was determined to take his budget, his money, his salary out of the budget. Now, you could say technically that doesn't fire him, but in effect, obviously it does, because there's no salary involved to it, and he left. I didn't want that to happen, but it happened. And how do you do it? Well, that would be an example. If we remove the money line, you in effect move the person who would be collecting the salary. But normally, and then practically every other case that I can think of, it is my responsibility to discipline.
So that wasn't a disciplinary issue.
It
That
wasn't,
was
but it had the same effect.
a budgetary line.
Yes, but the fact is that the budget had been passed with his line in place just 2 weeks earlier. So it was a little bit unusual. And obviously, my vote was against it, but the majority rules, and that's what happened.
Okay, there's a lot of people still tight about that, but we're going to move on. Let's talk about the lawsuit or the challenge. A lot of people are talking about that.
Right.
Can you just give us some insight as to what actually is happening with that?
Okay. Every line works independent of each other, and every line has the right to challenge. You can put that challenge in the next day, but within a couple of days, you've got to be very specific. The Democrats, for example, challenged John Gillingwater and successfully had her removed. We have the same right to challenge, and it doesn't have to be for the issues that the Democrats or any other party used. So we were claiming that the Democratic caucus did not give enough days warning that the caucus was being held. And I referenced the fact that the Unity Party, two of our people on the party, Quanah King and Charles Renfro, are registered Democrats. And I'm saying they were disenfranchised by not knowing about the caucus and have a chance to participate. And I'm sure there are others. So that was our argument. You had to do it 10 days in advance.
Right.
So it went before Judge McCormick, and though it took quite a while, his decision favored the Democratic line. But in his decision, he did note that the secretary for the Democratic Party only gave a 7-day warning instead of a 10-day warning. Now, our question was, is that a fatal flaw?
Right.
Or is that just something that can be trivialized? And apparently, it didn't work. So we're taking the second bite out of the apple, and we're going to the appellate division. Now, we may lose, but if you don't try, you don't have a chance to win. So, you lose 100% of the shots you don't take. So we're taking that shot. I don't know if it's comfortable or not, but it doesn't matter. Every line has the same right, and they can exercise that privilege, and we did so.
Okay. Well, that sounds fair. That's a little different from what we've been hearing, but good. So you heard it here first. Right. Now you guys can. So we briefly discussed pilots. Everybody knows that that's one of the topics that I really talk about a lot. It's the pilots kind of eating away at our tax base, and the people in the community are paying an awful lot of taxes because of them. So my question to you is, if revenue is an issue, why do we even entertain pilots?
Right. Well, obviously, it would be great if we didn't need a pilot. And for the new apartment buildings, as I stated earlier, that have long pilots and no jobs in effect, certainly not substantial number of jobs, that doesn't gain my interest, and I hope it doesn't gain any traction. But if we're going to get businesses to come into the downtown, we may have to look at a pilot. But if we do look at that pilot, we look at it, we want to have something to say about what's going there, the people. We want to make sure the pilot isn't so long that our grandchildren are paying it off. We want to see whether or not it's possible for the pilot to make the village whole. And going forward with that type of a plan, the pilot may have some worth. But the fact of the matter is, Conifer, if I can use that project as an example, wanted a 30-year pilot, and they were going to create 2.5 jobs. I don't get it. Plus, they would say, well, we have stores on the bottom floor. Great. What are you putting there? An existing business in the village. Moving them in. Well, that's a wash. That doesn't create anything new.
Right.
So, I couldn't follow it. And just to let you know, Newsday claimed we didn't put the issue of development on a board. And with the pilot, the question about Conifer went on the board at least 2 times. The first time, it was an error, and they had to correct it. But the second time, when we moved to vote, nobody voted for it. 2 voted against it, 2 abstained, 1 was absent. So to say, well, I'm against it, well, apparently we were all against it because it didn't get a vote. So downtown, I'll listen to what they want to do. I'll look at the pilot. I want to make sure the residents have an input. I want to make sure the pilot isn't so long that it suffocates us. And I want to make sure there's a job component and maybe even a community benefit component.
Okay, so the development of downtown, what is the goal? Our community is already 4 times more dense than Garden City. We're twice as dense as Queens County, you know, and so all I hear and all I see are more apartments. Are we making Hempstead the urban area of Long Island, or do we want to remain suburban? What is the goal?
I'm a suburban guy. And a lot of people tell me I'm thinking about the past, and am I supposed to apologize? We had a brilliant past, and things that we can pull out from the past that we might be able to use today can help. But the downtown, we've got some issues, obviously. The bank on the corner of Main and Fulton, beautiful bank. It needs to be occupied. Woolworth is a disaster. Nagasaki across the street is also an issue. So who wants to come in? Well, we had a church from Brooklyn that wanted to buy Nagasaki. Fortunately, it didn't get through the zoning because they didn't have parking.
Right.
Now, 2 of the buildings on the east side are county rented. They're going to, apparently, if what they're telling me, give up those leases. They're going to move the traffic board where you pay your tickets over to Westbury, where they used to have the children's court, and the children's court is moving.
Right.
The other one also may not be. So there's a possibility that we literally could have the whole block. And that's when some of your bigger developers with proven records might come in with a plan. And I've already met with RXR, and we want to go forward because certainly he has a history of being able to do things and get them done quickly, to see if that wouldn't appeal to him. Because he wants a bigger area, and that may occur within the next couple of years.
Okay, so the bank building on Main and Fulton, are you talking about the original Hempstead Bank?
Yes.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, that, you know, people say, what can that be? Well,
I have a
how
great
about
idea
bank?
for it.
How about a bank?
I have
A
a great
restaurant,
idea
you're
for
probably
it.
thinking about it.
No,
No?
I think that you can put loft apartments on the top floor,
Right.
offices on the second, and businesses on the ground level.
Okay. And see, that's an excitement, and that's a possibility. Certainly, it's a beautiful building.
It's fabulous.
Yes, and it has an opportunity for practical use. You and I probably remember when there was a medical center recently put into there.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
No. But here we go. Those are the types of thinking out of the box that we need, and hopefully that'll happen. Nagasaki, believe it or not, the former owner of Nagasaki has been back in the office looking, because he sees what we all see.
Huh.
Whenever we need to have some sort of a gathering, we're going to other communities and renting facilities there.
Right.
When we could have them right here in the village.
Right.
And the number of churches and other organizations we have can fund it by themselves if we can just do the right thing.
The right plan.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, Mr. Mayor. How many pilots or pilot-type projects have you supported over the last 4 years?
All right, in the last 4 years, the Rivoli, twice.
And why?
Well, actually, the first time was because it appeared to me and to others that the Rivoli was going to shut down, and they could not maintain. And I didn't want people in the street. So it was like the better of two evils. And I did vote in favor of, and the majority of the board also, to be able to give a pilot to the Rivoli so the people could stay there. The other Rivoli one was a little bit more, I think it was like a dozen units that they wanted to add on. And it seemed reasonable to me. But that was, as I have pointed out earlier, an old apartment complex designed to keep it open so that the residents did have, those who lived there, an opportunity to stay.
Okay.
One of the things too with the Rivoli, there was a community benefit agreement. There was a one-time $50,000 to the Police Activities League, and there was a $78,000 every year for 5 years for infrastructure improvement. So when there's a community benefit that goes along with a pilot, it becomes more palatable.
Okay, so have you had any other pilots that you've granted where there was a community benefit?
No, actually, most of the pilots, as you know, go before the Town of Hempstead IDA, and there were pilots, as you know, Conifer. Well, right up until the Martin Luther King Project, there's been pilots that have gone in front of the IDA board.
Right. Okay, so now, since you mentioned Martin Luther King Drive, we all know it's a historic landmark. It's been there forever. A lot of people have come into the community, including my family. Mm-hmm. We started on Wilclo. It was Wilclo at that time.
Absolutely.
And my sister and I went to Dorothy K, before we moved to the Heights, right? So it does serve a purpose, and it has for decades for many people. So what is it? But the burden to the homeowner, we also have to consider. I know all of that. Well, what's your position on that, Mr. Mayor?
So you said something that touches my heart, and I'm sure yours, because we're longtime Village residents. We need to support the residents of Martin Luther King Drive. I mean, some of them have been there since the 1950s, and it's obvious it's in need of renovation. And this may be a one chance in a lifetime to accomplish that. So what do we need? Well, obviously the people have spoken. The pilot's long, too long. We mentioned a moment ago that we don't want to leave our grandchildren with that type of a debt, and that's literally what this 42-year pilot would do. Also, where's the community benefit?
Right.
There needs to be a community benefit. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that Dan Deegan, who represents the drive, is going to come back to the IDA board for another vote with a new plan. And I guess he's figured out that the original plan didn't fly. I think it was a 6-3 vote, maybe one abstention. So I suspect he's going to try to figure out some way he can lengthen the pilot, or that he can make the village whole on the pilot. And he certainly has to have a community benefit. Originally, there was one. It was a community center, not the type of Kennedy Park look to it, but it was going to have rooms for study. It was going to have rooms where people could have computers, room for meetings for the people in the neighborhood, quiet games. It was a plus. It was a community benefit. And that got removed before the vote was taken, and I don't think that helped at all. So they're going to review it. And now, as you know, the Town of Hempstead IDA board, of which there are 4 members from the village, when there's an issue dealing with the village, we'll have to make that determination.
Have we had any development in the last 4 years?
Yes.
And what has that been?
Okay, well, Dell Bus Company, of course, that was approved at the IDA level and is in existence, and they are hiring local people. Also, supermarkets. There's one on Jerusalem Avenue that looks pretty well close to being completed, and there's another one that's going on over by Martin Luther King Drive, Lincoln Park. Now, personally, I could have put some other things there if I could, but this is what was approved it meets zoning qualifications, and those are examples of some things that are going on. So the idea of putting other areas, I'd love to have entertainment center. I would love to have a variety of businesses. But right now, we're talking Dell, we're talking the supermarkets that have come here, and hopefully we'll be able to even do more as we move forward.
Okay, so this has been going crazy on Facebook, but our code enforcement issues, the overcrowding in a village, 4 or 5 families in a single family home, some of those homes having 6, 7, 8 cars, and the fights that are now happening among our residents because homeowners feel like they have to put cones in front of their home to protect their space. Any plan to deal with that?
Well, I said earlier, and I'll repeat it, that I think we have to have a code enforcement unit that's set aside. And I think we have to add to it, which we are going to do, so that we can have code enforcement around the clock. Right now, the code enforcement hours are traditional. We need evening attention to those issues. We need weekend attention to those issues. And I think when that all happens, it'll help. But we also need quality of life issues that are enforced by a fair justice who will gain the attention of people who repeatedly just rather pay the fine than correct the mistake. We need to have that type. The cones I've noticed, I mean, they're not legal. There's a frustration for people who can't park in front of their own house. The truth is, in some neighborhoods, there's kind of a neighborhood understanding. In others, they could care less. And the result naturally is you can't even necessarily park where you want unless you have a good-sized driveway. And that would only be helped if there were less families in homes, the strict code enforcement. And I think we have to have a robust code enforcement, which would be embraced by the legal system.
Okay. Now, recently, the last board meeting actually, we just, you guys voted to have a hearing for police reform.
Yes.
So there's, a lot of chatter, what that's going to look like.
Exactly.
I'm a big proponent of foot patrol. I think that we really need that. If we ever have a restaurant district, which I'm hoping that we do because we have so many office buildings in our village, I think that would benefit. In order for people who don't live here and people who live here to feel safe, we're going to have to step up our game as far as foot patrolmen are concerned and code enforcement. Because if you put restaurant district in, you need people in uniform so that people feel safe and know that it's clean, right? So do we have, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the park, walk, and talk is part of the answer, obviously. I'm reinventing the wheel, so to speak. We used to do it, and it worked. It'll work again. Get the police officers out of the car. Get them walking. Get them talking to the residents. Have their presence felt. It does bring a better and safer feeling to the community. So I think that's an important area. Now, the fact that we're going to have a meeting March 17th at 5 o'clock. We only have room for 16 people in the room, so it's Zoomed. And what you're going to do is hear the result of many people who have been meeting for a long time to put together by the governor's creed a new plan of reinventing the police department. And they will have suggestions and recommendations, and there will be some input. And when we're finally satisfied that we have a document that fits the needs of the people and the people will embrace, then come April 1, we would present it to the governor. Okay. There's still some areas. I mean, I can be shooting myself in the foot, but let me bring up a couple. Body cameras. Now, the PBA is on record of supporting it, but I asked them to go a step further and they haven't. It is a negotiable item. They went to court and got permission negotiated. I want a body camera to be part of the uniform. If it's part of the uniform, we can move forward. If it's not, and they want to negotiate as they have done in some other areas, multiple thousands of dollars in additional pay to the officers for using it, it becomes $1 million hit, and it takes us right out of the challenge. Now, I want to explain to the police, I think, as I have done, the body cameras help them.
Protect them, yeah.
So it would be something that I think they need. Another controversial item, and I'll bring it up, is drug testing. Police cannot be randomly drug tested. That would have to be negotiated, a contract, obviously. They have their rights to negotiate if we were going to change that. They can be drug challenged if there is some kind of major event. Read like a homicide involving a police officer, for example. But that's the only circumstances. Again, I would think a police officer would say, I'm going into a life-endangering experience. My partner better be at his best.
Right.
And they would think that this would help them as well. But again, it's a negotiated item. It can't be something that we can simply enforce on them.
Can I ask you this? Is this just the Hempstead Police Department, or is this Nassau County wide? Is this everywhere that it's negotiated, or?
Yeah, each department, each village has their own negotiation. Now, even the plan that we're presenting to the governor, though there is some exchange and some common ground, it's still unique to the area that's presenting it.
I see. Because that was one of my questions the other
Right.
night, was random drug testing
Right.
for police officers. I didn't see it in the document that was online.
Yes, and that's a valid question, and one of the reasons why the community has a chance now to interact. But I can applaud the entire committee for their effort and their diligence and their intelligence. They have come up with a good plan, a very good plan, but we'll make sure that final determination has some input by the residents.
Good. I'm looking forward to that meeting.
Oh.
Okay, so let's talk about money.
Yes.
Village services and grant funding. How does that grant funding work?
Okay, grant funding is generally either federal, state, or county. It is possible to get a private grant as well. Federal, we got $1 million for the police. The state gave us enough money to have what we call a GIVE program. That's a police initiative. GIVE, G-I-V-E, stands for Gun Involved Violence Elimination. On the county level, the CDBG, that's the Community Development Block Grant. That's a little over $1 million that we get to go into that area, of which 15% is involved in not-for-profits in the community to enhance their opportunity to serve. The rest go to special type of projects. The pavement of Main Street, the water fountain of the Joyce Shackley water fountain display on Main Street is another example. The sidewalks and other safety features around the David A. Patterson School. Jackson Street is going to be repaved from Clinton to Franklin. There would be some examples of the different types of projects that are done through that agency.
Okay, I think that's great. Now, since you mentioned the community block grant,
Yes.
when is the window of opportunity for those agencies that might want to apply?
Right. They actually needed to apply already.
It's already done.
And it has already been allocated, and it's on the board, so we can approve it.
Okay.
People have to apply. They can always apply. Mm-hmm. And once they do, that there's a series of questions that have to be answered, and then we go forward. Obviously, this is a great area for us to be able to be of service to the different types of organizations that serve the youth, the toddler to the senior citizen.
Okay. So now I have a question that's, kind of touchy, but what's the story with that $5 million grant? A lot of people feel like it was awarded, but we didn't use it, or can you just give us some insight
The water
on that?
sewer,
The
the $5 million.
Yes, sir.
The cost for that effort is about $20 million. So now $5 million is fine. Where do we get the rest? Well, the theory was that the developers would help. But the amount of money that the developers were going to pay, indeed, in return for getting richer, it wasn't really that dramatic. In fact, in some instances, it was the footprint of the project, and we have to think village-wide. So we haven't yet been able to create enough income through that effort to be able to accomplish this.
Okay, so let's see if I'm a good student, if I've been listening. So that $5 million was a matching grant, and we have to come up with the 15. So that was 25% of what the project is going to be.
Basically, that's the way to look at it, and we don't have the ability to absorb that other part. We obviously need a grant if we're going to get the additional money that's necessary and use the grant for other things as well. One of the items close to my heart, which was right there at the very beginning, was Marshall Park. To give you a quick history of Marshall Park, during James Garner's last year as the mayor, he put the proposition up to improve 3 of the parks, including making Marshall Park a year-round experience, indoor, so it would be good weather and bad weather. Because right now it's just an empty lot that's unsupervised. It didn't pass at that time. Since it was a bond, it required a weighted vote. And though it passed 2 times, 3-2, and went down 3-2 once of the 3 times it was presented, we didn't get the necessary 4 votes. So I put it back up. By now, unfortunately, instead of costing $2.5 million, it was going to cost almost 3 times as much. And it wasn't quite as heavy as it sounded, because it would have been spread over 30 years, and we could have perhaps made it a little bit more of a better presentation to the public on that. But they did vote it down. Obviously, the trustees voted it down after hearing public comment. I still think the idea of an indoor facility, Marshall Park, is a good one. Of course, if we're going to succeed, we have to bond. One of the ideas of bonding is that we will be able to tell the developers what their share is.
Yes.
Instead of them telling us, we'll tell them.
on.
But the fact of the matter is, I also wanted to have a piece with Marshall Park. And I put that up first, and it lost. So we haven't really gotten to the second piece, but that's a must. We have to bond. And a bond, as I mentioned before, requires a weighted vote.
Okay. I love it. So listen, I forgot to say in the beginning, you guys, I'm sitting here with Mayor Don Ryan, who is running for re-election. He is on the Unity Party line as well as the Village First line. I should have got that in the beginning, but
Here we are.
you gotta love me, right? Okay. So we've asked basically all the questions I have, but Mr. Mayor, is there anything that you would like to address that maybe I didn't ask?
Okay, there's a few things that come quickly to mind. I think one of the things that I accomplished that I liked, with the transparency, is that at a village board meeting, prior to my administration, there was an open mic only at the end of the meeting. So people would be able to get up and vent, but they'd have no impact on what they were talking about. Their presence was meaningless. So now we have a mic at the beginning. And at that mic, you can talk about any docketed item, and perhaps there's something you could say or do that would influence us. Also, it's now not limited to stakeholders and residents. If the mic is open for any one person, it's open for everybody. So that, I think, is something that has to do with transparency and is healthy. Also, I've always thought transparency was important and integrity. And I know I've had some issues about residency of candidates. Let me just tell you the New York State law. You may run for office in the Village of Hempstead or elsewhere and not necessarily live in that community. The law says that you have to be a village resident the day you are sworn in. So somewhere along the line, to be fair and clear to the public, you could say, well, look, I live here, but obviously if I win, I will have a Hempstead residency. It'll be my primary residency. It'll be my domicile, and I can be sworn in. So I just wanted to make that as clear as I can, and I know that the mayoral candidates are clear on that, and I'm sure that they are policing their own lines.
So we can have people come and run for office in our village that don't currently live in our village?
Right. Now, the school board is different, and I like the school plan differently. You have to be a resident for 1 year prior to being able to run. But the New York State law says you have to be 18 years of age, you have to be a citizen of the United States, and you have to be a resident of the village when you get sworn into office.
Wow.
So if you win and your residency is not in the village, you have to make it village. That has to be your primary domicile. That has to be the place that you live in, where you pay your taxes, et cetera, and then you could get sworn in.
Wow.
I know it.
Well, that's interesting.
That's different.
People.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think the important issue here is the integrity that goes with it. If that's the case, say, here it is. And then the people can understand and they know what you're going to do, and no doubt if you win, you'll do it. But it's important, I think, for the integrity issue that each of the mayoral candidates make that clear of their slate.
Okay. Is that everything?
That's everything.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Mr. Mayor. I
Thank you.
appreciate you taking the time to talk to the community and let us know,
Right.
the things that we're talking about, and how you feel, how you stand on those issues. So thank you. I wish you the very best. You want to just, run over who your platform is, or?
Yeah, I'll be
anything
glad
else?
to. And I appreciate this opportunity. And the Unity Party, I talked to you, and the Village First Party, we want economic development. But as I said before, I'm not excited about pilots that don't create substantial number of jobs for new apartments. Interested in quality of life, going to put some of that on the court system. But we certainly need stricter code enforcement, and we need tougher penalties. Interested in the anti-crime. That's extremely important. Some of the money that we are going to be getting from the state, we're going to be purchasing license plate readers. This will let us know who comes in and who leaves the community. We want the cameras all to be working. Nothing more frustrating than having a crime go to the camera and it's inoperative. Need better lighting. We want to be able to help our youth. Both Kavan and Sheila have pledged to help us with a splash park at Lincoln, which I think would be great. Marshall I haven't given up on, but maybe I need to approach a private-public type of partnership. And we have held the line on tax levies during my tenure, and I think that's important. Now, who's on the line? Charles Renfro, who is seeking to return as a trustee. Laquana King, who is looking for a trustee seat as well, our first time in the political circus. And Carla Guerra, who is an experienced individual who has about 15 years of a law background, 4 of which were under Lance Clark in our village court, and she's running to be our justice. And I would emphasize that this team reflects the people we serve. We've been criticized for the Old Boys Network, people asking, where are the women? Where are the Hispanics? Well, this ticket answers the question. And I'm hoping on March 16th, everybody gets out to vote.
Okay, tell the people.
People, I'm asking for the support of the Unity Party and the Village First Party. I say to you that this party reflects the people we are serving. We have black, brown, and white. We have women, Hispanics. It is something that I think is what the village needs, and we're offering you that opportunity to agree with me by voting for row B on March 16th. That's a Tuesday. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this evening. I'm signing off. This is Shelley Brazley for Color News Long Island. Have a great evening.